I want to start with this story about Justin Trudeau. So as you know, Justin Trudeau, like many other foreign leaders, have decided to, of course, side with the state of Israel, back in the United States decision to send whatever aid that Israel needs. Well, Justin Trudeau's constituents aren't too happy about that. And they do want Justin Trudeau to call for a ceasefire. So it appears that Justin Trudeau was at a restaurant and he was approached by protesters. Let's go ahead and get into that clip here. Shout out to Mint Press News for this. Ceasefire now. Protesters surround and disrupt Prime Minister Justin Trudeau while eating dinner in Vancouver, Canada. The PM was told that he has blood on his hands due to his complicity in Israel's genocide of Gaza civilians. We'll get into this, but really quick, I have a question for you guys. I've been to Canada, but I've only been to Montreal and Quebec City. I've never been to Vancouver. I've actually never been to the western side of Canada. So if any of you are from Canada and you're in the chat, let me know, what is the difference between, like the western part of Canada and the more, the Quebec part of Canada. Oh, and I've been to Toronto too. So let's get into this. Justin Trudeau's dinner did not go too well.
Ceasefire now! 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 Look at us, Justin! You're killing kids!
Whoa. So they're brutal with it. They said, look at us, Justin. And that's Justin Trudeau right there. So obviously he's going to leave.
Ceasefire now! Ceasefire now! Shame on you! You have blood on your hands! Call for a ceasefire! Call for ceasefire! Call for ceasefire! You have blood on your hands! You have blood on your hands! Ceasefire now! Ceasefire now! You fund genocide!
Mr. Prime Minister, how many more kids?
Justin Trudeau, you fund genocide!
Mr. Prime Minister, how many?
So this is actually the second politician that we've seen actually confronted when they've been at dinner. Elizabeth Warren, we talked about her as well. She was also confronted at dinner.
You fund genocide, Justin Trudeau! Look at us! Look at us! Look at us, Justin Trudeau! Answer for your crimes! You are killing kids! Ceasefire now! 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 Ceasefire now!
You know what's interesting too? One thing I want to add really quick, because they followed him all the way out of the restaurant, right? So one of the things that I do want to mention is that what is the right thing for him to do at this moment? The right thing for him to do is to stop and talk to his constituents, but he's not. He's running away, just like Elizabeth Warren also ran away. This is what makes politicians look even more guilty. When you can't face your constituents, these are the people that voted for you. They're the reason why you're in office. But when you make decisions that they are not happy about, a lot of times these politicians just run away.
Ceasefire now! Ceasefire now! Ceasefire now! Shame on you, Justin! Now! Ceasefire now! Ceasefire! Justin Trudeau, answer us! Answer us! Answer us! Ceasefire now! Ceasefire now! Ceasefire now! Ceasefire now! Answer us, Justin Trudeau!
So as you can see, he's over here, and I guess these individuals here seem to be okay with him or whatever. But again, he's just ignoring his other constituents.
How many kids is enough? How many kids is enough? Instead of taking pictures, tell us how many kids is enough.
You see the vanity of some of these politicians? They're talking about a serious issue, and Justin Trudeau is sitting here and he's trying to have a photo op. He's taking pictures with the people that are not, critical of him, and ignoring the people that are being critical of him and do have concerns about the way that he has been governing. By the way, this is not the only issue. The past year and a half, Justin Trudeau's constituents have been confronting him about other decisions that have happened under his leadership. Let's not forget when Zelensky came to Canada and they actually had a guy who was a freaking former Nazi receive an award. That was under Justin Trudeau's leadership. There was also the issue with the truckers in Canada, where Justin Trudeau wanted to seize their bank accounts because they were protesting, because they decided to stop working. So Justin Trudeau, the past year and a half, I don't think there's one story that I've covered on this show that has been positive about Justin, because he's just been a mess.
Ceasefire now! 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 Fire now! You have blood on your hands, Justin! Come out! Answer to your crimes! Tell us why you're killing kids! You are a murderer! Now! Ceasefire 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 now!
So they followed him the entire way, as you guys can see.
Ceasefire now! 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 Woo! Hi everyone! We were just live from Vidges where Justin Trudeau, Prime Minister of Canada, was dining.
Did you see him arm in arm with that piece of shit?
Woo!
Fuck you, bitch.
Well, Justin, I don't know when you are up for re-election. I think Ashira's in the chat. You can let me know, but it does not look good for you. Like I said, I named 3 incidents in particular that your constituents were not happy about. They made him leave the entire restaurant. Now, apparently, these confrontations must be working sort of, because now Justin Trudeau has issued this statement. Canada's Justin Trudeau tells Israel to end killing of babies. Well. Here we go. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has called for Israel to stop killing babies, earning a furious response from Israeli counterpart Benjamin Netanyahu. Trudeau said on Tuesday that the killing of women, of children, of babies in the besieged Gaza Strip must end. So you guys see what's happening? And I'm sure that's probably not the only time that he was confronted, but that was the video that I saw of Mint Press News. But this is why I said before, you have to hold politicians accountable. And you don't hold them accountable just by reelecting them. You don't owe them your vote. So you don't have to vote for them again. And politicians should be held accountable to their constituents, and they are public figures. So if you're a public figure, people can approach you just like with celebrities. You can't be a celebrity and say, I don't want to be in the public eye. I don't want the paparazzi to follow me. That comes with the territory of the job. It goes on to say Netanyahu pushed back, insisting that Hamas is responsible for civilian deaths as Israeli forces continue to batter the enclave. Obviously, we all know, we've seen the videos on social media, so everybody knows what's really going on. I urge the government of Israel to exercise maximum restraint, Trudeau said in his sharpest criticism of Israel since the war on Gaza broke out more than 5 weeks ago. The world is watching on TV, on social media. We're hearing the testimonies of doctors, family members, survivors, kids who have lost their parents. The world is witnessing this killing of women, of children, of babies. This has to stop, he told a news conference in the western province of British Columbia. This is what I was telling you guys about social media. Because so many videos have gone viral on social media, it got to the point where now even mainstream media had to discuss it. I don't think that would have happened if it wasn't for the pressure of the protests and for those viral videos on social media. In a post on X directed at Trudeau, early on Wednesday, Netanyahu said, it is not Israel that is deliberately targeting civilians, but Hamas that beheaded, burned, and massacred civilians in the worst horrors perpetuated on Jews since the Holocaust. By the way, I just want to add here, even CNN has been debunking the beheading comment. The forces of civilization must back Israel in defeating Hamas barbarism. That's coming from Netanyahu. It goes on to say Canada has maintained that Israel has the right to defend itself against Hamas after the Palestinian group attacked southern Israel on October 7th, killing 1,200 people. I want to mind you, notice that this number has changed. It was 1,400, now it's 1,200. But it has also expressed increasing concern over the mounting death toll in the battered and besieged enclave, where more than 11,200 Palestinians have been killed by Israel since the conflict started. The price of justice cannot be the continued suffering of all Palestinian civilians, Trudeau said on Tuesday. All wars have rules. All innocent life has equal worth, Israeli and Palestinian. The fact that they have to even say all innocent life has equal worth, that tells you that we still have a long way to go when we talk about equality in the world. About 350 Canadian citizens, permanent residents, and family members had been evacuated from Gaza, he added. The Canadian leader also called on Hamas to stop using civilians as human shields and to release all hostages it took on October 7th immediately and unconditionally. On X, Netanyahu said Israel is doing everything to keep civilians out of harm's way, even as his army relentlessly bombards Gaza. Now, I'll go ahead and tell you that is incorrect, obviously. I just saw a video earlier from Dan Cohen where an Israeli advisor is now admitting that even though they told Palestinian civilians to go to the southern part of Gaza, that they are now entering the southern part of Gaza and attacking that part of Gaza as well. So this is what I've been telling people all along. When you are caged in like an animal, you have nowhere to go. They can't run to the sea because Israel controls the sea. They can't hop on a plane because Israel controls the air. And Israel also controls the land. So there's nowhere for them to go. And like I said before, I believe that this is Netanyahu trying to put pressure on countries like Egypt to open their doors and let the Palestinian people come in, and then to lock them out and not permit them to return back to Gaza. It goes on to say on Wednesday, Israeli soldiers raided the Al-Shifa hospital, which they have been attacking for days. Thousands of patients and displaced Palestinians are trapped inside, including dozens of premature babies who are fighting for their lives. By the way, the premature babies, it was reported earlier this morning that all of them died. International rights groups have said Israel's attacks on hospitals should be investigated as war crimes. Last week, Trudeau called for a significant humanitarian pause in the conflict to allow for the release of all hostages and the delivery of enough aid to address civilian needs in Gaza. But it's not just Trudeau. Like I said, there was pressure put on him by protesters, his constituents, but also it appears that President Macron also is now asking for the same request. Now, this comes amidst a lot of the protests that have happened in France as well, where the French citizens have also put pressure on their leader, asking him to call for some type of ceasefire or an end to the madness. So President Macron is also asking for Israel to stop. Listen to this.
We've heard from the French president saying that Israel must stop killing babies and women in Gaza. Emmanuel Macron told the BBC in an exclusive interview at the Elysee Palace that there was no justification for the bombing, saying that a ceasefire would benefit Israel. While recognising Israel's right to protect itself, he said, "We do urge them to stop this bombing in Gaza." He's been speaking to the BBC's Europe editor, Katia Adler.
We've had weeks of aid organisations sounding the alarm about Gaza, and so you've now said that humanitarian pauses in fighting aren't enough and there needs to be work towards a ceasefire. Are you disappointed that other world leaders aren't joining you in that call, like the US or the UK?
So Macron is now calling for a ceasefire. So do you guys see what's happening? This is what happens when the pressure comes on from the outside, from the people on the outside. All of these protests that have been happening, that are still happening, by the way. There have been multiple actions today. There are thousands of people protesting outside of South Station in Boston. There are thousands protesting in New York City right now. This has been a nonstop thing, the protests, the rallies, etc. And people are not letting the cold weather stop them. Protesters in San Francisco yesterday shut down the Bay Bridge. Like, this has been continuous. This is now larger than the George Floyd protest. So when you have the masses of people come out all over the world in all these different countries, that puts the pressure on the leaders to actually try to do something that is just and humane.
No, I hope they will. And let's be clear. I mean, I was one of the first leaders to call the Prime Minister and President of Israel after the terrorist attack, the 7th of October. We clearly condemned this terrorist attack and this terrorist group and recognize the right of Israel to protect itself and react. But day one, we say that this reaction and the fight against terrorism, because it is led by a democracy, should be compliant with international rules, rule of war, and humanitarian international law. And day after day, what we saw is a permanent bombing of civilians in Gaza. And I think it's very important to say the whole story. But I think this is the only solution we have. This is ceasefire. Because it's...
Let me pause here for a second. So everybody heard that, right? So this is President Macron calling for a ceasefire. You now have Justin Trudeau saying to Israel, stop killing the women, the children, and the babies. More leaders that are allies with the US government are starting to speak out. How long until there's enough pressure put on Joe Biden that he's going to have to call for one as well? Because typically it's the other way around. Typically, these countries follow the lead of the US government. This time, they're the ones that are leading. And I got to laugh at this Violin. Violin says, OMG, I did not know he could speak English. Yeah, he actually can. I don't know why in some interviews he'll only speak French, like even when it's like a US reporter. In some interviews, he'll only speak French. And then they'll have the captions at the bottom. But in others, he'll speak English. It's really interesting.
Possible to explain. We want to fight against terrorism by killing innocent people.
you've talked about the fight against terrorism needing to be merciless, is the word you used, but not without rules. And you've just referred there to the high loss of civilian life in Gaza. Do you think Israel is respecting those rules, the international rules that you're referring to?
Look, in the very first days, it's clear that the emotion, the compassion, created a situation where everybody was just close to Israel and backing them and sharing the pain. And we do share their pain, and we do share the willingness to get rid of terrorism. We know what terrorism means in France. But I think there is no justification precisely to attack civilians.
What I would like just to clarify with you, are you saying that Israel is guilty of breaking international humanitarian law, potential war crimes?
No, I'm here.
She went in with the follow-up question.
Look, I think it's not the proper way to approach a question. We do recognize the right to protect themselves. And 1 month after this terrorist attack, I think it would be not the right way to deal with a partner and friend just to say you will be condemned and you are guilty. De facto, today, civilians are bombed. De facto, these babies, these ladies, these old people are bombed and killed. There is no reason for that and no legitimacy. So we do urge Israel to stop. I'm not here to, I'm not a judge. I'm a head of state. I just remind everybody international law. I call for a ceasefire, and I will urge them for a ceasefire, for a humanitarian ceasefire.
Let me pause here for just a second. Think about it this way, guys. Let's say we got into a fight. Let's say you and I, we had like an altercation. There was a jab here. There was a jab there. Okay. Now let's say I struck first or whatever. I just went kapow. And you're like, nah, man, I'm going to defend myself. Now you come after me. That should be the end of it, right? But let's say instead of just you coming after me, let's say you come to my job and you knock out every one of my coworkers and say, I'm going after Sabby, but you're knocking everybody else in the face. This is how I want you to think about it, right? Because essentially this is what is happening. Ro Khanna, I think, gave the best example of this, him of all people. He gave the example of Osama bin Laden. He said, when we went after Osama bin Laden, we went directly after him, not after all these other people. You know, the U.S. government wasn't like when they were trying to capture not Saddam Hussein, but him too. When they were trying to capture Osama bin Laden, that was an isolated event. They went directly for him. Netanyahu can do the same thing. They know they're in the tunnels. They can do the same thing. They can go directly after them. But I'm seeing babies, kids. I'm seeing babies being taken off of incubators, kids being pulled out of the rubble. This is ridiculous. Over 11,200 people, and they still haven't captured Hamas.
That was Emmanuel Macron. Well, let's bring in our panel. Andrew Fisher, former Director of Policy at the Labour Party under Jeremy Corbyn, and Mo Alaisi, Executive Director at the Georgetown Institute of Politics and Public Service. Interested for you both for your reactions there to what Emmanuel Macron had to say. Andrew, I'll start with you.
Yeah, look, I think it's very welcome that he's joined the majority of world leaders, we shouldn't forget, who are calling now for a ceasefire in this conflict. And it leaves President Biden and Rishi Sunak in the UK increasingly isolated in not backing a ceasefire. We saw the UN, over 120 countries backed a ceasefire. Only a few, I think 14, voted against, the US, one of them.
Let's pause there for a second. Over 120 countries backed a ceasefire. The US and the UK, and by the way, the UK, again, they usually follow our lead. So they're probably holding out because we're holding out. Then also you got to remember, Britain caused all this mess. We're going to get into that because Britain, like they caused a lot of this from the very get-go. But I think one thing that we have to think about is the fact that once again, the U.S. is the bully. The U.S. is the country that wants to hold out, that wants to continue to allow these civilians to be murdered. That's the U.S. government. We're the ones that are holding out. I showed you the other day, the president of Indonesia told Joe Biden to his face, Joe Biden, you need to call for a ceasefire. The U.S. remains the bully.
So this is really important and a significant shift. And look, Emmanuel Macron is obviously a diplomat, a head of state, but the fact that he's saying to Israel, you have to abide by international law is a clear recognition that currently they're not. We've seen white phosphorus being used in densely populated areas. We've seen the carpet bombing of civilian areas. We've seen a siege imposed on a civilian population. All of which are illegal under international law. It's very clear that Israel has not acted within international law in this reaction to the terrible events of the 7th of October. So it's a significant intervention from Emmanuel Macron, and I hope it has influence both in the UK and in the US, because at the end of the day, there is no military solution to this. It is going to require a ceasefire and talks and a peaceful settlement that the Palestinians and the Israelis have been let down by their leaders and by the international community for at least 30 years since the last big serious attempt to try and get there.
I also want to add too, when he says there's nothing else to do right now but to call for a ceasefire. We want people's lives to be saved. I would also add the same thing in reference to Russia and Ukraine. We all know it's over for Ukraine. I told you from the beginning, they were not going to win this. They weren't going to win. So what's the best thing to do right now? Call for a ceasefire and call for some type of negotiations, whether that's 2-state solution, 1-state solution, whatever. Moving forward, something needs to be established so that the Palestinian people have some type of self-determination and that they are not treated like animals, and they cannot be occupied. They cannot be occupied. It's not just Gaza, by the way. They're pulling people out of their homes in the West Bank right now. Israel is also striking the West Bank right now. Hamas is not in the West Bank. They're not in Lebanon. They're not in Syria, but they're hitting all these places too. And, the American people can't be fooled for this for so long because we've all seen the videos on social media. We know what's happening. We'll continue a little bit more here.
Mo, with regards to the kind of international community, do you think other leaders will look at what Emmanuel Macron had to say, take on board those comments and start to think they might air theirs more strongly?
Perhaps. I think a lot of the world is still a lot of the world is really torn. They want to see Israel exercise its right to self-defense. They know that Hamas is a brutal terrorist organization and that it itself is acting against the best interests of the people they purport to represent. Hamas itself is working against the best interests of the Palestinian people, preventing many of them from leaving, using them as human shields. And so, I think a lot of the world is still trying to grapple with this. I think people are increasingly horrified by the scenes and the images we are seeing of the devastation in Gaza and of all of the people who died as a result of the military action. I found it interesting that the Israeli ambassador to the UN used the opportunity to attack the UN for accepting Hamas's propaganda. Some of it is propaganda, and I'd take anything Hamas does with a grain of salt. But at the same time, we are seeing these images for ourselves. We are seeing the devastation for ourselves. We know whatever the number is, too many civilians are being killed. I'm happy to see that that there's now going to be a daily humanitarian pause. Israel seemed to be forced to take that step by international pressure. The Biden administration has been very aggressive in pushing that.
But he was only aggressive in pushing that because of the unrest from the people on the ground outside protesting in the streets. That is the only reason. And I just think that for me, you know, there's no winning this. I'll go into a little bit more detail when we get to the other story where I talk about a little bit of the history of this conflict so that people have more of a grasp. But the point that I want to make with this particular story is this. You also now have two Western allies, Justin Trudeau and President Macron, calling for an end to this and some type of peace negotiation. And you have Joe Biden from the US government, and you also have the UK still not willing to do that. So we'll have to see what happens. Ashura says the coldest place, Sabby. Oh, Vancouver. Eric says Alberta, Canada is just one dude and a bunch of cows. Okay. Natural Person says Vancouver Island is really nice. Oh, I'm going to check that out sometime. Bryce, every one of these mofos should be uncomfortable to go anywhere. Yeah, that's how I feel. The politicians. The Oracle says the elected elite are so reliably duplicitous and arrogant. A kid says the Canadian activists are on point 100%. Their police are nicer than the US ones. Yeah. Ashura says next year or two is election time, Sabby. Okay, so Justin Trudeau is up for re-election in a year or two. Thank you, AJF. Just fascinating and astonished how we talk about Israel and Palestine be framed as if there is an equivalency. One is an occupying state. And thank you, Jay. What kills me is that these same individuals who wanted Putin to face the ICC aren't saying the same about Bibi. Well, I'm going to explain to you why, though. Also, they aren't calling for a ceasefire because it's right. This is a CYA moment. Interesting. All right.